Finding and cultivating relationships with profitable business partners and allies is one of the most lucrative activities that you can do in your business. And quite frankly, it's also one of the most rewarding. Why is it then that so many women entrepreneurs waste their time with terrible partnerships? I get into it in this episode. So here's the question. In a world where the rules of business have been written by men, how do women entrepreneurs like us, women who want to make millions of dollars and impact millions of lives, how do we create enormous success on our terms? That's the question, and this show explores the answers. Welcome to Power Presence Position. I'm your host, Eleanor Beaton, and I'm on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who generate over $1 million per year in annual revenue. I'm an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and leadership coach. I'm a wife, mom of 2 boys, and I'm the CEO of a 7-figure business. Stick around because on this show, you'll learn how to think, communicate, and get paid like a 7-figure CEO. Let's go. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Power Presence Position. This is Eleanor Beaton. It's also episode number 434. And today I'm talking about profitable partnerships. And to support me in that, I have an incredible guest. Her name is Ebere Akadiri. She's the founder of Rise and Lead. She's based in The Hague. I'll be telling you more about her in a moment. But I just want to take a minute, welcome you to the show. As I'm recording this, we are getting to the dregs of 2020. We're getting to the very bottom of the barrel here. And I don't know about you, I'm quite excited. I have a love relationship with 2020. It was a super challenging year, but it was also a very transformative year for myself, for my company, for so many of my clients, for my family. So I've got nothing but love for 2020, despite how difficult, how harrowing this year has been for so many of us and for millions of people around the world. All right. So when I first started coaching women entrepreneurs, I noticed 2 things. The first is that I noticed how it was so much more powerful to be able to join forces with certain collaborators and through the power of that relationship grow faster. So an example, I remember when I partnered with one of Canada's big banks, they were a promotional and sponsor partner for events that I had for this podcast in its early years. And that helped them position themselves in the field, in front of women entrepreneurs and leaders as an ally to us, right? So it was very effective for them. And it was really effective for me because it was the power of association with that brand. So that sort of brand association elevated my standing in my industry, but it also gave me exposure to their massive audience. So that was a really powerful partnership. And so I was always good with partnerships. But what I started seeing, and I have seen this again and again and again in working with women entrepreneurs, is that sometimes we can get lulled into partnering. And this is not like business partnerships, like co-founders, by the way. That's a completely different conversation. But sometimes we can get lulled into partnering with other people, not because it's strategic or win-win, but because we don't have confidence to do the thing on our own. So I started seeing a lot of people getting, distracted by partnering on initiatives that were ultimately a distraction from their core business and didn't really add and ultimately became something else that they had to do. So I actually saw that happening much more than really profitable win-win partnerships that were truly a good use of your time. And you know me, right? Like if you're listening to this show, you know I can be a little ruthless with my time. I personally have plenty of time for the word ruthless, by the way, when applied appropriately. And for me, the ability to have time to think, like that cash, influence, and autonomy. Autonomy is so important and powerful in my life that I'm going to be extremely choosy about where I spend my time. And so when I started seeing clients wasting time on partnerships that were not fun, were not profitable, and didn't help them build their brand, didn't help them, get leads, I'm like, why are you doing this? So nevertheless, partnership and collaboration has been a cornerstone of female microeconomies, which is why we're going to be doing a conference about female microeconomies and strategic partnerships in May, y'all. If you want the details on that. So it's going to be very limited attendance. It's going to be a virtual conference. Get on my list. So go to eleanorbeaton.com/join. I will regale you with written gold in your email inbox. I promise you, you will not find, I challenge you to find a newsletter that is better, more entertaining, and better researched than mine. I'm just going to put that there. I am not modest, clearly, although I'm very humble. Anywho, get on my list, eleanorbeaton.com/join. Sign up there, and you will receive information about the event that I'm doing on female microeconomies and how to inside that, how to craft really lucrative, high impact partnerships and affiliations. Okay. So it's going to be great. And what I love about it is essentially, actually what I was going to call this event was Screw Facebook. P.S. I do advertise on Facebook, but I've been increasingly moving off the platform. But what I was trying to do is really show people alternatives to build influence, to build their audience without resorting to paid traffic, but also in a way that doesn't have you running around like a chicken with your head cut off to this, that, and the other thing, really good strategic partnerships. So as I started seeing, this is an area that I think is going to benefit our audience so much to talk about, to explore. There are so many people doing incredible partnership deals, incredible partnership initiatives. You just need to hear them. You just need to see what's possible. And that's going to get your brain going about how you can leverage the power of partnerships to grow your company, to grow your brand, to grow your influence, and quite frankly, to get exposed to amazing people who have awesome ideas. So this is an area of work that my team and I are going to be looking at in a lot more detail over the next 6 months, really leading up to International Women's Day. Because for me, a big focus this year is this idea of the creation of female microeconomies, right? How are women entrepreneurs and leaders buying from each other, supporting each other? Because that is happening. It's happening quietly underneath the surface. It is super, super exciting. And we're going to be exploring that. But anywho, what's my point here? My point is when I was thinking about how to start introducing this topic as something that we can converse about, I wanted to bring somebody in who is excellent at forging partnerships. And so the person that I'm thinking about is Ebere Akadiri. I met Ebere. I've known about her for some time. She invited me to speak at her Rise and Lead Summit. So Ebere is from Nigeria. She'll tell you this story. She has a successful restaurant company, a series of successful companies in Nigeria, actually. Her husband works for Shell. He gets a big transfer, big promotion to The Hague. And so she decides to go. She decides she's going to uproot. They've got, I think she said 4 or 5 kids. They move from Nigeria to The Hague. And she launches her business, Rise and Lead. And Rise and Lead does a really high-profile conference once a year that focuses on women in leadership and diversity and inclusion. And look, within like the first year or two, girlfriend is partnering with mega companies. She's partnering with very high-profile women's associations. And I can remember she and I having a conversation after I spoke at her event, and I just saw the quality and the caliber of how she does things. I was like, this woman is a great partner for us. I know she can bring stuff to our audience that's really powerful, as you're about to see. We're going to bring stuff to her audience that's powerful. This is a great partnership. And so we had our first conversation. It was myself, Ebere, and Talitha. on my team. And we were talking through, and honestly, like I kind of wish you could have been a fly on the wall in that conversation, because we were just having a very clear conversation about our values, about what's important to us. We talked about, we needed to make sure, so we went through a very honest assessment of the relative size of our companies and of our reach to make sure that this was a win-win partnership. And so we got it all out on the table. And I was like, Ebere, women need to hear this. Like, we need to kind of take people behind the scenes a little bit of what we're talking about and how we're talking about and how we're approaching partnering, because I see so many people wasting time by not having these kinds of conversations, or by not being as forthcoming as they need to be and not being as discerning as they need to be. So that really brought about this conversation. Ebere she opens up with an amazing story about how she got started as an entrepreneur. She takes us through the decision to uproot herself and her businesses, to say goodbye to those in Nigeria and move to The Hague. She talks about how she reinvented herself in The Hague and really has positioned herself as a leading voice in the field of women's leadership in Europe. And then we have a really practical conversation about how to partner, whether it's with big name companies like Pfizer, who is one of her partners, or with other colleagues like myself. We really walk you through that process. So I hope you find this useful. And again, get on my list so that you can be notified about when tickets go on sale for our partnership event. I'm just calling it partnership event. Currently, it has the world's most boring title. Don't worry, I will remedy that when I come up with something really good. But really what we're exploring in that event is how to forge really lucrative, profitable partnerships your way. We're going to explore how partnerships are really the foundation of women's microeconomies around the world. And we're going to hear from some amazing speakers who have leveraged the power of partnerships to advance their agendas, to advance their mission, and to advance their cash. All right. So without further ado, here is one of our incredible partners, Ebere Akadiri, founder of Rise and Lead. Ebere Akadiri, welcome to Power Presence Position.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited for us to have the opportunity to be together. I was so honored to speak at your Rise and Lead conference. I talked about it in the intro. So well done. Such incredible women leaders and entrepreneurs from around the world and particularly Europe. And when you came onto our radar screen, my team and I were like, wow, this woman is impressive, really, really successful entrepreneur. We'll get into your entrepreneurial background in a moment. But I'd love for you to kind of take us way, way back to the very beginning. Like, take us back to your childhood and your upbringing. What was that like? Tell us a little bit about that. Where did you grow up, and what was that like?
Okay. Nobody has ever asked me that question before. So thanks for asking. Thinking about my childhood, I grew up in a tribe called Igbo, and Igbo is a tribe in Nigeria. For some people who don't know Nigeria, Nigeria is in West Africa, and with a population of over 200 million people. And then we have like these major tribes and almost 360 different languages. So I grew up in this big tribe called the Igbos. And growing up, I lost my mom when I was 8 years old. So my mom passed. So it was a kind of a difficult childhood. But I could see that nobody wanted me to feel the pain of the passing away of my mom, because I was her last child. So all the aunties and, uncles and the entire community thought it was their calling to take care of all of us, especially me. Like sometimes I come home and there's a lot of food from different women, like in the entire community sent their daughters to come and live with us to continue helping us at home so that we don't feel the loss of our mom. And, but the beautiful part of my growing up is my dad, because I was the last child. My dad loved to dance. and I always dance with him. We dance a lot together. And when you're dancing, people will spray money on you. And so one particular day I was dancing with my dad, and people were spraying money on me. My brother was spraying some dollars on me. And of course, being a child, some children will be greedy and say, oh, this is a lot of money, I'm going to keep it. But instead, I spread them back on my dad so that he could have them. And then he called me a name in Igbo that says Omena Nwata, which is a child, a generous child. And since then, I've tried to live up to that name, of leading through generosity and fairness. I felt they should have also given to my dad, but they didn't give him. They gave to only me. And I was very young at that time. And so that's basically, I would say that even though I had that horrible experience, but I grew up as a happy child because of the community that surrounded myself and my entire family.
What an amazing, heartbreaking and amazing story. Now, how many siblings did you have? So you were the youngest of how many?
7.
Oh, wow.
Because at that time, people used to have even almost 10 children.
Yeah.
So my mom had 7. And another thing is my eldest sister now became the mother. Now she took the responsibility to become our mother, while my eldest brother was supporting my dad to kind of stand in as also like supporting my eldest sister. So I had a happy childhood.
Yeah.
It wasn't expected, but somehow I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So when you think about, and you think about this idea of leading through generosity and so on, I mean, you've gone on to accomplish incredible things as an entrepreneur. But when you look back on that upbringing, what's one sort of thread or lesson that you took in addition to leading with generosity? How did that experience shape how you are as a leader today in your businesses?
I think it's the way that the entire community kind of took it as their role to help us. And also the fact that my mother was a nurse and was also nurturing, like helping women who couldn't afford to go to the hospital, like deliver their babies. So those things helped me in my way of stepping into other people's problems. So when I see people having issues or they talk to me about it, I see it as my responsibility to support them in any way I can. Yeah.
You know what's so fascinating? This makes so much sense. So, and we'll talk about Rise and Lead in a moment, but earlier this year, I was privileged to speak at your Rise and Lead event. And so Ebere has done this event. It's a very successful event, brings together hundreds of women and corporate sponsors and just incredible, it's a really cool experience. And one of the things that I thought stuck out so much about it were 2 things. So one, it definitely felt like it wasn't just another conference. It felt like a community coming together. And I can remember, there's a lot of tech and that kind of thing. And you had like a community of women who were helping the speakers to make sure that we were comfortable. It was just so well done. And it felt very organic and just, extremely organized, but also very organic and kind of community driven. So that, success always has clues, and there's always sort of the predecessors So take us back to when you started your first business, because you've been an entrepreneur for some time. Take us back to when you started your first business. What prompted that? What was the business that you started?
So before I forget, I want to say thank you for honoring my invitation to speak at the Rise and Lead Summit. And you really noticed well that community of women who were willing to support me to make that summit successful. It's the same values that I share. And that's also the kind of people I attract, to my community, So taking you back to how I started my business, it was in 2000 and I think it was in 2098. I had my first daughter 2099. So in 2098, I was working in this corporate environment as
1998.
Sorry, yeah, 1998.
Like,
sorry.
Whoa.
I mixed up. Sorry, 1998. It's over 20 years, to be precise. Yes, thank you. So I was working in this corporate environment, an international company as executive secretary of the operations manager. And it was a very tedious environment to work. They turned me into a workaholic. I was working from morning, like 7 a.m. until midnight, like every day. At one point, I thought I wasn't going to find a husband. So luckily, I found a husband inside the company because that's how much I was spending my time in that
Where else
company.
are you going to find him? Yeah.
So when I was 7 months pregnant, I lost my job. I was pregnant heavily and I lost my job. So I felt that no other company was going to hire me, number one. And number two, I was already a workaholic. I couldn't sit idle. So I decided at that point to set up my own business or my own company. And because I had no clue about how to start, I invested in the wrong business initially, thinking I could set up a business center to continue what I was doing in my office. After all investing all my payoff, I suddenly realized that I had no passion in that kind of business. I wasn't the kind of person that was going to be sitting behind a computer like for so long. So I gave it up. And then some friends advised me to, travel outside the country, buy like ladies' clothing for my colleagues at work and that they would love it. So once I had my child, my first daughter, and she was 3 months old, we traveled together to London. So I went to wholesalers, bought a lot of clothes, brought them back to my country, to Nigeria. And of course, yes, people bought them, but I didn't understand a lot on how to pricing. And so I lost all the money. But instead of giving up, someone advised, why don't you have a retail shop like so many other boutiques in that neighborhood? Again, I followed their advice, got a location, but this time it was the wrong location. So I didn't have a lot of customers. So after 6 months, I closed down that business. However, I was thinking about it, and my sister came one day and said, we should go to another location. So I said to her, I don't want to hear anything about business again. And suddenly I saw an advert about a bank teaching entrepreneurial leadership, like entrepreneurship boot camp. So I decided to spend some money and attend. It was a 3-day highly intensive program, like from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And after I left that program, I suddenly realized I didn't know what I was doing all this while. And you don't know what you don't know. And that's why my businesses kept failing. So I borrowed some money and restarted the same clothing business. And within six months, I recovered all my losses because I now understood everything about strategy, marketing, branding, sales, the way to convince people to buy my products as a retailer. So within 6 months, that business turned around, did so well. And then I remembered my childhood dream of owning a restaurant because I had a restaurant. I studied food science and technology. And so I also did some internship in all these fast casual restaurants. So I dreamt that I was going to own one day. But what I did not know is that it was quite capital intensive, like from $100,000 upwards. But I didn't give up. So I invested in the restaurant business. And luckily, after several attempts to secure a bank loan with 7 banks turning me down, I eventually got a bank that said yes. And that was how I built the restaurant, which has brought me to where I am today. Because that restaurant became successful within the first year. With the first day we launched, we had 200 people coming in every day. After that, we had like 700 people eating every day. Now we were increasing like every month. And then we had 2 branches. 7 sales outlets, 56 employees. Then we had like one of the largest catering outfits, close to our restaurant. And there I was building and thinking of getting up to 10 locations within 5 years until my husband came home one day and said, he works for Shell, that they have transferred him to the Netherlands, and he wanted the whole family, because we had 5 children. He wanted all of us to join him for 4 years in the Netherlands. So you can imagine that my heart was broken because after everything I have done to build a successful business, I was going to be thrown into the desert where I had to start all over again. With so much family pressure, I agreed, joined him to the Netherlands. And when I got here, I was depressed because I didn't know where to start from. It was a different culture, different language, no network.
Now, did you sell the businesses in Nigeria?
Not immediately. I left them for another 2 years because at that time, I had attended an entrepreneurial leadership development program that taught me how to develop systems so that with systems, my businesses can run whether I'm there or not. So I left the business for another 2 years, running it from here. But when I started another business in the Netherlands, which was the Ataru Foods packaging spices, the same spices I use in my restaurant, I started packaging them as a blend to sell and introduce the West African cuisine in Europe. So I couldn't really manage the two. So I sold one of the restaurants, and then the other one, I let it go because, it was a rented property. Mm-hmm. So that was how I now focused on building my business in the Netherlands, and then went back to school to study management and leadership, like master's degree, because it was kind of my dream to, especially after I reinvented myself, while I was seeking God's face, so to speak, as in what's next in this new country. I heard that voice that kept telling me to teach what I know. Don't die with your knowledge. So I started teaching cooking workshops and packaging spices, and then went back to school to kind of improve myself. It was during that period that the concept of Rise and Lead Women came about. And that's the summit you attended. That's how it came about 3 years ago. So
this is amazing. Yeah. And I'm riveted. Sometimes on the podcast, when people are sort of taking you through their story, you're like, I'm going to cut them off, interject. You know what I mean? Yes. Like, let's speed this up. Yeah. When you told the story, I found that really riveting. And there's so much there, how do we make, when big things happen for our family, how do we handle business continuity and how do we make those decisions? And so that was fascinating, how you exit a business in another country, how you work through that sort of depression. Who am I now? And reinvent yourself. And then just that there's so much there, so much there. And it's interesting because this is what I find fascinating. There's this entire growing industry around entrepreneurship education and also entrepreneurship and leadership education, for women. And one of the things that I find fascinating, when you look at the reasons why women start businesses, significantly proportionately more women start businesses than men, because they're called necessity businesses. So they're starting the business because it's a necessity. They lost their job. Their corporate culture just doesn't jive with how they want to live their lives. Versus opportunity businesses, the entrepreneur that's sort of the natural inborn entrepreneur who's like, oh, I see a gap, I'm going to fill it. Yeah. And what I have found is that there's a bit of a difference in terms of internal orientation. So if you're a necessity business, to your point, you have to train those entrepreneurial instincts, like what you were talking about, systems and pricing and all these things. We have to kind of train ourselves and reorient ourselves, to do those. There's so much to talk about, but and I do encourage, if you if you're really, appreciating what Ebere has to say and the way that she's kind of taking us through her experience, I really strongly encourage you to follow her and check her out. We'll give you some links to do that in a moment, but just, it's very impressive. But one of the things, let's go back. So you're in a brand new country, you're establishing yourself. And so first business number one is doing, taking what made you successful in Nigeria, modifying it and applying it to the European market through packages, cooking classes and spices, and et cetera. Then you start Rise and Lead. Now, this was 3 years ago, and within 3 years, you've taken this to where you have deals you have major corporate sponsors from some of the world's biggest Fortune 500 companies. You have hundreds of people who attend your conference. It's very, very impressive, incredible speakers, et cetera.
Yeah.
To what role? Tell us a little bit, and I wanted to kind of talk through this idea of partnerships, because strategic partnerships and collaboration how important has that been to the growth of your company?
That's like the bedrock of my entire company, starting from the business in Nigeria to coming to the Netherlands. When I wanted to start up a business in the Netherlands, I was so afraid. I wasn't sure about how things work here. But what helped me was, I started thinking about all my successes back home. So the more I thought about my successes, the more I convinced myself that I can do this. Just go ahead and do it. So to take care of this lack of network, right? When I started Rise and Lead, it started as a summit, like a conference to bring women together, to encourage them to raise their aspirations. Like, why don't we have so many women building companies and employing people, setting up, scaling to different locations? That was the drive for me at that time. So it was mainly focused on female entrepreneurs. And when I spoke to a few of my friends who were already in this field, and I said to them, I wanted to launch a summit, a conference to bring women together and to bring powerful business women together, like established leaders, to inspire them to kind of raise their aspirations and rise and lead. That's the way the name came up. And they said to me, they laughed at me. They're like, Ebere, you're not serious. You can't host a summit within 3 months when you don't have the community, you don't have the network. It's simply not going to work. I didn't listen to them. I said, it's going to work. So I made a list of all the women, all the organizations, women empowerment organizations in the Netherlands, in Belgium. I even extended outside the Netherlands to the UK. And I reached out to all their leaders. And I said to them, this is my vision. I want you to please partner with me, become my strategic partner. Let us bring your members together with other members, and then we bring speakers to kind of help them learn how to rise and lead in their businesses and in the corporate spaces. And 8 of those organizations said yes to me.
Okay, so this is amazing. And let's break this down in detail. So how many organizations did you reach out to this first? Because I think this is where people get stuck. You know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah.
How does this work? So how many organizations did you reach out to? Do you remember in that first one to kind of partner with?
I did reach out to almost 50 organizations.
50. Okay, beautiful.
50. So some of them didn't respond. Some of them kind of
rude.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you reached out to 50. And did you do that initial reach out with an email?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have I used the same. Most times I go on LinkedIn, I use Facebook, and I found their email addresses, or I find out from somebody else who is a super connector, like, do you know somebody here? Can you connect me with this person? Give me their email address. So yes, I did reach out with an email. Then I invited them to a call.
Yeah.
At the conversation, I told them the win-win benefits of coming, and they were really impressed. And the most important thing is that I gave them the tools to promote the summit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I gave them everything they would need. So they didn't need to rack their brain on the write-ups. I did all the write-ups, the email sequences, the social media content, and I gave to each of them and then gave them this tracking link to kind of promote it to their members. And it did work. And the funny thing is, I told all my speakers that I was expecting 35 attendees since it was kind of too short for the preparation. The speakers were shocked when they came in and saw over 100 people in that room. I saw those 35. I like, under promise, over deliver. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Ladies, if you're listening to this, like just pay attention. So, and this is where I love this idea of reaching out on behalf of yourself. Like those 50, I just want to take a moment here because I think it really started with I'm going to think smart. I'm going to find organizations that have groups of people. I'm going to reach out to 50. So think about 8 partners delivered, tons of attendees to your event. And then there were also all of those that you never heard from. That's how it works.
Yeah,
right?
That's how it works. Yes.
That's totally how it works.
Yeah.
So interesting. So when you think about, and then, so there's so much there. As you have grown Rise and Lead and the network, and you have a leadership development program that is for entrepreneurs and women in corporate. So that's what the programming offer in addition to the conferences and stuff. Take us from that place. So you have your initial conference, where it is today. How did you develop, how have you developed that partnership approach even more?
Yeah, so when we started first, it started as this women empowerment platform for entrepreneurs. But I had a co-founder who was already doing a lot of work in the space of corporate companies like women leaders in organizations. So we kind of had an argument. I said to her, my interest is on female entrepreneurs. Let's help them to build companies, to employ more people, and close the gender leadership gap. And she said, that's not going to work. That's not the way it works. We need to push the corporates to promote the women to leadership positions so that those women can also support every other woman. So I now said, okay, that was when the second year I started reaching out to corporate organizations and started trying to bring them as speakers, partners, and we got about 4 initially, 5 corporate organizations who agreed to give us some money, like in terms of sponsorship, in exchange to also promote their brand. So that was how that happened. So for this year, the summit you attended, if you noticed, we had kind of almost 60% corporate professionals and to 40% entrepreneurs. It was changing a bit. Initially, it was more entrepreneurs than corporates. So we kind of wanted to expand into the field of gender diversity, gender leadership, diversity and inclusion. So that was our theme for last year, inclusion and leadership and equity. And so we had more companies join us. And we now have some of these companies who are going to become members of our roundtable conversation to discuss best practices on how to empower women as leaders, empower women as entrepreneurs, and empower women as change makers. And so that's what we're doing now. And we are, like he said, we kind of attracted a lot of major global organizations like Google, Aon, Accenture, and their top leaders, because we believe that we need to learn from our role models. That's why we focus on bringing those top leaders, people like you, who are already established, to mentor and guide aspiring leaders, women in business as well.
Fascinating. Yeah. So what I'm hearing then is that, it's really been about also like if you're going to sort of partner and take almost like a community driven sort of approach to growth in the sense that you're looking at who's here, What do they need? And how can you provide? What I find so fascinating is if you think about, like, if you analyze this model, it's really been about you partnering with organizations to bring people together, taking a look at who's in the room, what do they need and want, and then how can we provide that to them, which I think, and it sounds so simple, but sometimes people can forget to do it. And I think that's one of those sort of entrepreneurial instinct things that we need to train. Like the Stoics were all like, you have to train your mind and character.
Yeah.
You're not just, you have to train it. And I think it's the same. You have to train your entrepreneurial character too.
Yes. And you summarize basically what we do is about partnering with communities to close the gender leadership gap, to have higher representation of women in top leadership positions in corporates and also in the marketplace. And what you just said is what I see some people do is that they roll out a program, like something very generic, and then they present it to the companies or to businesses, potential strategic partners. And they don't take the time to find out what is it that this particular organization is looking for. So what we found is that we needed to customize each program to suit each partner. So it's not like your one program suit all kind of approach. Some businesses want to empower female entrepreneurs. Other businesses want to attract more women into their leadership pipeline. So you can't be giving them just one generic promise, which doesn't work for them. So connecting with people, drawing closer to people and finding out what exactly they want is really something I can tell you has worked so much in our favor.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, this is so exciting. And, as we wrap up, and I mean, one of the reasons so we kind of connected in the summer, we've known each other for I've known about you and your work for some time, and we've kind of talked about it internally. And then we started connecting. And one of the things that anybody in my community will see is just sort of us working with Ebere's company in different sort of fun projects to support each other's work. And we had a really fun conversation. So this was so funny. I was like, people need to be a fly on the wall, because I've sort of railed a little bit at what I see as very unproductive partnerships between women in business, where it's like, it's just not that it's unclear. There's a lot of distractions and massive creation of new stuff. And it becomes anti-growth, So then Ebere and I are sitting down with Talitha from our team, and we're just kind of talking through. And so there are a few things there. Like one was, two people who are established in their markets. We genuinely liked and respect each other, which is really important, because that's huge. Like a lot of respect for what the other partner is bringing, and there's overlap in the communities that we serve, but we do very different things. And we were having a very real conversation about, look, how big is your community? Are they rough? Like, is there equity here? If there's not, then how would we, doesn't mean we can't partner, but how do we work around that? And it was just a very open, transparent conversation. And I think that transparency is so critical, when you're establishing partnerships, like to really have to vet the partners and to figure out how is this going to be win-win.
Yeah. The first time I read about you, it was through Ali Brown's website.
Yes.
I saw your testimonial there, and then I went to your website. After I read it, I'm like, wow, we have a lot in common. She's also helping corporates and entrepreneurs. So when Talicia, I think, approached me, I'm like, wow, this is an easy yes, because I read a bit about you already, and I've listened to your podcast, which I really enjoyed listening to. And, one thing about partnerships, which I actually wrote a white paper on it, I'll share that with you so you can share with your community, is that it's actually a way to expand your business without spending so much money of your own resources. But the thing is, most people do not know how to play that game. So many people are so selfish, so self-centered, so to speak. They're thinking about themselves. What am I going to get? They never worry about what am I going to give? And this is where generosity and fairness is very important. My important values, generosity and fairness. Like, I'm thinking, what can I give her? Okay, beyond even what we agree to do. Like, how can I help her? And so I started thinking, okay, how can we help so many of my friends in the US to kind of gain access to the European market? And how can we also expose our members through our Founders Table Club to have access to the American, to African, to Asia, kind of have them collaborate with other businesses. So, like you mentioned, I think the most important ingredient is about trust and transparency. Two ingredients: trust. You should be able to trust the person you're getting into partnership with. There has to be transparency. Like you asked me, how many people do you have in your community? And you told me yours. It's very important that we discuss all those things so that you can see that. Another thing is about your values and missions. Are they in alignment? So you cannot go and start partnering with businesses that you do not agree with, no matter what. You can't do that because of money, right? And then it's also important to establish your goals so that you don't get disappointed. Like, what is the major goal of these collaborations? So many people are so afraid to collaborate with people they perceive as their competitors. But that is so wrong.
They're the best collaborators.
Yeah, that's the best.
And you know what? And to this point, I love this conversation so much. What I find is this. It's that what makes that go away is when you are so clear about who you are. And you are just like, the more I do stay in my lane and do exactly what I want to do, and I talk in exactly the way, you have your own identity. Not to me, because to your point, let's say we're like, oh, well, we're competitors, but it's actually not true, because our people, who buys from only one company? Nobody.
I know. I'm like that as well.
Right? I mean, our people would be, sophisticated women entrepreneurs and leaders. And you show me a sophisticated woman leader or entrepreneur who invests in professional development from only one source. Like, that's not, so this is so
that's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
Yes.
Yeah. We could talk all day. So listen, if you are a member of my community, you are going to be seeing some really cool initiatives that we are promoting, that Ebere is doing. The white paper, as an example, you need to get your hands on that. We'll be linking to that. It's just really, I think you can see here, there's what Ebere is bringing is an approach to partnerships that can help us leverage, the power of each other to expand our businesses mutually. Ebere, where can people go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
So I have the Rise and Lead Women, riseandleadwomen.com.
Yep.
And then I'm very active on LinkedIn, Ebere Akadiri. That's my LinkedIn. And also the Instagram for Rise and Lead Women. So it's Rise and Lead Women. Just
Rise and Lead Women.
Rise and Lead Women. That's where you get your hands in everything we do. So, but also on my personal website, ebereakadiri.com, I kind of use that to help women who wants to because I interview a lot of women leaders. So I kind of compiled a list of some of the mindsets and actions of successful female leaders I've already interviewed. So people can get their hands on that as well and start learning how to lead their businesses.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, my friend. It was so wonderful to hear more about your story and learn more about you. And I can't wait to share this conversation with our people.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Eleanor.
If you love this show, then you will love even more my missives, i.e., my emails. If you're not on my email list yet, I strongly encourage you to sign up at eleanorbeaton.com/join. Now, when you go and sign up for my email list, you will quickly discover why some of the most popular, well-known, and influential voices in the world of women's entrepreneurship quietly, studiously, consistently open every single email I send out, because they want to be inspired, they want to be entertained, and also I think they really want to connect with a woman like myself who's in full command of her voice and is willing to open up and share her thinking, her ideas, and her story. I promise you that on this email list, you are going to be entertained. You are going to hear really valuable tips about stepping into your power as a leader. And you're also going to get fun insight that I do not share anywhere else. Go to eleanorbeaton.com/join. And I promise you it will be the highlight of your inbox.